Welcome to Crosstalk on MHTV and 91 Rock FM. Crosstalk, the show that addresses the current issues that face you as a Central Michigan University student or resident of Mid-Michigan. The phone lines are open. Call 774-3691 or 774-3698. Crosstalk on MHTV and 91 Rock FM. A student production from the Broadcast and Cinematic Arts Department of Central Michigan University. The views expressed in this program are not necessarily those of the university, its faculty, administration, or the Broadcast and Cinematic Arts Department. And now, the host of Crosstalk, Jason Laker.
Welcome to Crosstalk. I'm Jason Laker. Our phone lines are open, 774-3691, 774-3698. On the eve of the one-year anniversary of Governor Engler's upset victory over incumbent James Blanchard, it's appropriate tonight that we discuss some of the issues that are surrounding his attempts to balance Michigan's budget. We have two scheduled guests this evening. Obviously, if you've looked outside, you've noticed that it's snowing quite heavily. So right now we have one with us. Hopefully the second will be with us shortly. We have John Riley, the director of the Isabella County Department of Social Services, with us. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us tonight.
You're welcome.
Great.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you very much. It's lucky that the weather didn't keep you both back, or we'd be taking calls and having a free-form show tonight. But having said that, obviously we're going to be talking about Governor Engler's attempts to balance the budget and how it's affecting your office. You are the director of the Isabella County Department of Social Services, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what your office does, first of all.
Our office manages the public assistance programs for Michigan. There are approximately 20 programs. Included in those are the Aid to Dependent Children program, the Food Stamp program, the Medicaid program, various services programs, Children's Protective Services, Adult Protective Services, delinquency, foster care, adult community placement, just to name a few.
Okay. Now, approximately how many people are affected by your department within Isabella County?
There are currently nearly 6,000 people on assistance in Isabella County.
Now, before the show, you had mentioned that there were approximately 54,000 individuals living in Isabella County.
According to the 1990 census, that's correct.
Okay, so we have well over 10% that are affected by your programs. Now, before we move into the specifics of the budget with regard to your programs, is it disproportionate or not, or I should say, is it unusual for over 10% of the people living in a county to be on some sort of financially aided programs?
Well, not in Isabella County. If you look at the 1960 census, the 1970 census, and the 1980 census, approximately 10% of the population was receiving some form of public assistance. So in this particular county, for a period of several decades, the percentage of people on public assistance has remained fairly constant.
Okay. Now, what type of budget did you have? Let's talk about a year ago, before Governor Engler started, or obviously started in January, but what type of budget did you have before?
The grant levels for people on assistance were significantly higher than they are today. There has been rateable reductions in most of, if not all of the programs in an attempt to help the state balance its budget.
Okay. Now, what do you perceive to be the message behind Governor Engler's upset victory over Jim Blanchard with regard to budgetary issues?
People were ready for a change. I think it was a combination of activities. I think Governor Blanchard underestimated then Senator Engler. There was a certain segment of the population that really wanted incumbents out. And I really think people were ready for a change.
Okay. And that's obviously a key issue in any election where there's sort of an unusual outcome or something that was unexpected. Obviously, the people that put Governor Engler into office, as you said, they wanted a change. But do you think that the change that we're seeing is the change that they wanted?
No, I don't think so at all.
Okay, could you maybe expand on that by saying, for instance, speaking to what expectations people had with regard to your programs. If we put a new governor in office, are things going to get better? What were they expecting?
Well, first of all, Governor Engler promised that he would eliminate the general assistance program for employable adults, and he has. That particular program is currently in litigation with the Court of Appeals, but right now, general assistance for employable adults is they are not receiving any cash assistance. Now we get into what is the definition of an employable adult.
That was my next question, right?
I mean, if it's an 18 to 25-year-old male that looks like he should have gone out for Central's football team, then there isn't much sympathy in the community for that particular individual. If the individual was 40 or 50 or 60 years old, had some minor illnesses such as hypertension and other ailments, then the general population really doesn't consider those people employable adults. There's a big difference between being employable and being hireable.
Okay. What would that distinction be then?
Well, as you know, the economy is in a recession at the moment, and therefore the number of jobs that are available are significantly reduced, therefore creating a much greater competition. I think if any of the local employers are looking for 1 or 2 employees to expand their operation, they might get as many as 100 applications. If the economy was better, they might get 10.
All right. Now, Governor Engler, let me refer to an article that was in Wall Street Journal last Wednesday, October 30th. And, in fact, a number of the questions that we'll be talking about tonight we'll be referring to this article because it was very interesting in that it was a very favorable article in saying more or less the bottom line is that Governor Engler inherited kind of a big mess, so to speak, with regard to deficit situation in Michigan, and that he's taking some tough steps to remedy the situation. And as I said before, the Wall Street Journal seemed very favorable in its assessment of his attempts. Now, he was somewhere down here in this article, it says, rather than perpetuate welfare dependency, Mr. Engler argues the state should help poor people find work. And then it goes on further. It says able-bodied welfare recipients are no longer costing the state money, but neither are they getting significant job training from the state. Obviously, this wasn't Governor Engler talking. Getting significant job training from the state. Such programs, after all, cost money, and many question the wisdom of undertaking welfare reform during a recession. And we did refer to that just a moment ago. What can we do now if the aid to these so-called employable individuals is being cut off or significantly reduced depending on the situation? How are we going to find them work? Or I should say, are there training programs in place now to replace these things?
Well, it's difficult to participate in a training program if you're not receiving any income at all. Mm-hmm. I mean, everyone has rent to pay, utilities to pay, transportation needs. So it's difficult for people to participate in a training program, even if it is available, in the event that they're receiving no cash assistance. Certainly, people shouldn't be encouraged to participate in job training. Perhaps a stipend program would permit them to participate in a training program and yet have enough to pay the rent, pay the utility bills, food, and yet transportation to get to the training program.
Okay. Now, on the idea of job training, this certainly is not a new idea. Other states have tried different approaches to this. I recall seeing a videotape presentation on this issue, and the name of the state escapes me right now, but the crux of the thrust of the program was that the state's trying to push this program. We're putting people through job training, and the reporter who was doing the investigation, went in and took a look at the money that the individuals were making in aid before the job training, and also in-kind aid such as insurance and food stamps and things like that, and then compared to what they could expect to make after they get a job and subsequently would be cut off. And it in fact showed that they were better off being on the welfare and other programs. How do you respond to that?
Well, if you look at the average grant for a single general assistance employable person, it was around $146 a month. If you look at minimum wage at 40 hours a week, and most minimum wage jobs don't start at 40 hours a week. They're probably around 32 hours a week. If you multiply that out, the simple mathematics is that people are better off taking a part-time minimum wage job.
And of course, as I said before, we're also talking about such things as insurance and another. And now I know that Michigan had certain programs in place to help with rent in some cases, more in the urban areas.
Well, not necessarily so. If a person needed a shelter and had a utility responsibility, that was included in his grant. General assistance clients also got a medical program called General Assistance Medical, but by and large, very few providers accepted it. So, I mean, if you have an insurance that providers don't accept, you're not really better off. I'm sure if you had the opportunity to interview several general assistants or former general assistants clients, the first thing they tell you is the general assistance medical program, very few providers in the community accepted it, simply because it paid significantly less than the average Blue Cross Blue Shield policy that most people in this community have, or their parents have for them.
Okay, thank you. Now, before we move on, let me remind the audience that the phone number here is 774-3691 or 774-3698. We're discussing Governor Engler's budget. And, of course, if you're out there and you are affected by this budget, or perhaps you have some questions for Mr. Riley, again, the director of the Isabella County Department of Social Services, don't hesitate to call. We can put you on the air. All right, now let us continue. Obviously, we're having a comprehensive discussion, and I once again, let me apologize to the audience that due to the weather, our other guest has not arrived yet. If he should arrive before the close of the show, then of course we'll put him on. Having said that, we will continue our discussion. Now, we were just talking about the difference. We were comparing in-kind and aid to people on your programs versus the jobs. Now, okay, your response was that people are better off with the jobs. Okay, now let's move to that aspect. Obviously, in Isabella County, there is a large number, some 17,000 students, for instance. So people might argue that there are a dime a dozen, so to speak, people that are trained and are employable, and then they're also competing for jobs with the individuals, and maybe there's some overlap. Do you have a lot of students on your programs?
Well, we have some students, single parents who are participating in a higher education program. But that's not the average single person competes against CMU students for the limited number of part-time jobs that are available. And the average CMU student is probably better educated, is more articulate, and certainly the average general assistance client doesn't compete very well against the Central Michigan University students.
All right, we're going to continue on that note after the break. We are talking about Governor Engler's budget. We have John Riley with us right now, Director of Isabella County Department of Social Services. We're going to go to a break now, and we'll be right back with Crosstalk. Thank you.
vest.
That's right, Vince. Sure, airbags are great, but you always got to buckle your safety belt.
Okay, Amarillo.
From the McGruff Files, a story about some folks who got organized to take back their neighborhood. The place was getting run down. Crime and drugs were out of hand, and honest folks felt like prisoners in their own homes. Neighbors decided to do something, so they worked together and with the police. Things happened pretty quick after that. Weekly meetings led to community action. Vacant lots were cleaned up and fenced. Neighbors even started planting gardens. Nice job, Sherry. Real nice. All the folks pitched in. Garbage was recycled. Street lamps were fixed. Before you knew it, they turned a bad situation around. The neighbors had their neighborhood back. How about that? Way to go, guys. Things are looking better for these folks nowadays. Yeah! Working together works, so don't get scared, get organized. Pick up a pencil and write this down, and I'll send you my free booklet. Let's get the neighbors together and help me take a bite out of crime.
I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade.
Some kids take to swimming like a fish to water, and some don't. In fact, any child can drown in just 2 inches of water. Make the water safe for your child with the Red Cross Water Safety Program.
Under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade.
Welcome back to Crosstalk on 91 Rock FM and MHTV. The phone lines are open for your comment or question. Call 774-3691 or 774-3698. If the lines are busy, keep trying. Crosstalk on MHTV and 91 Rock FM.
Welcome back to Crosstalk. I'm Jason Laker, and we're talking about Governor Engler's budget. With me right now, we have John Riley, he's the director, of the department, Isabella County Department of Social Services. I understand we have a caller on the line, and I'm not sure who that person is right now. Let's see if we can get that person on the air in just a moment. Before the break, we were discussing the so to speak, competition between general assistance, employable individuals, and CMU students. This is a very precarious paradox because obviously Governor Engler's from this area, and yet you find yourself in one of the most difficult situations. We have, on the one hand, the people that you're trying to serve with your programs and trying to get them jobs. We have CMU students competing for those jobs, and all around we have the fact that Governor Engler's from here. Could you talk a little bit more about how this competition for a few number of jobs has affected your department?
Well, obviously, in the last year, the biggest growth in jobs have been in the service retail area, and basically they've all been part-time, or the vast majority of them are part-time. Students taking, let's say, 12 hours a semester, and based on the higher education expenses, more students are looking for part-time work. More employers want part-time because it gives them more flexibility. With part-time, they don't have to offer major medical, which, as you know, is a large expense to them. So there are more CMU students, a greater percentage of CMU students competing for the part-time jobs, and a general assistance client has much greater competition. And students tend to be a little more aggressive in their interview with a potential employer, and by and large are much more hireable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we can expand on that still in just a moment, but we do have the caller ready now. It's Gregory, a Rochester junior, and go ahead, Greg.
How you doing?
Thanks for calling.
I have a question for the guest. This is one of the questions. Do you think that Governor Engler's cuts of the general assistance will lead to a more violent, more anarchic society as a whole, with more crime and generally more, people just being angry about everything?
Well, that's a good question, Gregory. Obviously, there's some alienation on the part of the people that have been cut off. How do you respond to that?
Well, certainly there is the potential for people who are homeless to be much more agitated and people who do not have their shelter met, their utilities, people who are in the process of being evicted from their home certainly are much more agitated.
Do you have counselors working within your department that keep in contact with your clients?
No. By and large, people who are under a great deal of stress are referred to the local community mental health agency.
I guess what I'm getting at is what type of contact you have with your clients.
The clients who have had their general assistance removed are still on the caseload because they're eligible for food stamps. So they're still seeing their assistance payments worker. Unfortunately, their assistance payments worker doesn't have any answers for them in terms of their shelter needs or their utility needs. And so therefore the level of frustration of several clients has been exacerbated since October 1st.
Okay, Gregory has another follow-up question. Go ahead, Greg.
Yes. You were saying that it would be better for the general assistance people to get a job at minimum wage, even if it wasn't for 40 hours a week. How would that be better, and for who would that be? Who would that really benefit? Would that benefit the general assistance person or the employer of the business, or the upper class as a whole?
Well, if you look at the amount of assistance that was available to a general assistance single employable adult in September, if you added up what the standards were, what we allowed them for shelter, what we allowed him for utilities, what we allowed him for his personal needs, he or she for his personal needs. If you added up that amount of the grant and you added up the amount of money that a person would get in an average month, the person who was working part-time had more disposable income than the person that was receiving the general assistance.
Okay. Thank you, Greg, for calling. When I was asking about the type of contact that your caseworkers have, the reason was as sort of a follow-up to Greg's question. If what type of responses have you? What type of concerns? What type of things have your clients been saying with regard to these changes?
Well, you have to realize that we're not an extremely large office.
How many people work there?
There are 17 caseworkers. They each carry over 200 cases each, plus do their own intake. So there have been other cuts to other programs other than general assistance. Probably in the month of October, if you were an assistance payments caseworker, the largest cut that you saw where you had the most, that was the most time consuming, was the elimination of the emergency needs program. So an ADC person who had a home repair, let's say the hot water tank went out, the washer, the dryer, the refrigerator, the water pump, let's say they were outside of the city limits and their water pump went out. There's no money, with that program being eliminated, there's no money to fix the appliance that broke. And so we've had to refer on other community agencies, churches, Salvation Army, Red Cross, ACAP, to do those emergency home repairs that prior to October 1st we were able to handle.
Now, is this the problem? Are these problems prevalent throughout the state? Or,
Oh, yes.
Okay. Is it disproportionately distributed in any way?
Well, there are some municipalities where their water bills fell due in October. If their water bills fell due in October and they have a very short period for which a homeowner would be given the opportunity to pay for them, a particular community might have a disproportionate amount of water shutoffs.
What's been happening in Isabella County with regard to utility shutoffs for your clients?
There have been some. There have been some electric and some heating.
Where are these people going? What are they doing?
So far, they've been able to contact the various other community agencies that help with emergencies, the Salvation Army, Red Cross, and ACAB. Unfortunately, probably a 3-month supply of emergencies hit those agencies in a 30-day period. So, although we, as a community, were able to meet most of the emergencies in October, now some of the agencies that normally were able to help in October are out of money now. So November I see as a much more difficult month for the community. Plus, it's much, if this cold spell continues for the whole month of November, then heating-wise, that'll probably be our number one problem.
Do we have a lot of homeless in Isabella County?
We have a greater number of homeless today than we did, obviously, in September. We have more families that are homeless.
Just because of these cuts?
Yeah.
All right. And do you have any numbers, any statistics on that?
No, at this point, there have been a certain number of evictions filed with the court system, but our legal system is such that the filing of an eviction doesn't mean the person will automatically be homeless tomorrow. There are certain court proceedings that take time, so we expect November to be a little worse for us than October was.
All right. Now, has local business or any other agencies, perhaps local government, for instance, the city commission, have these agencies, or I should say, has local government or local business been of any help in the situation to maybe pick up some of the slack?
Well, financially, to pick up the slack, no. Well, I've talked to several local community leaders who are concerned about the number of street people that they see. And at least from their perception, the number of street people are growing. And the severity of the problems that the street people have is also significantly growing.
Now, some counties have been known to supplement different benefits. Is Isabella County doing anything on a county level, the county commission, or any of this?
Not at this time.
Okay. Do you think that is a feasible option?
In the budget that just passed, Public Act 111, there was the opportunity for the counties to participate in a block grant for both emergency needs and general assistance medical. Most of the counties in the state are passing resolutions telling the state of Michigan that they're choosing not to participate in the block grant. The biggest problem is that in their opinion, the program is severely underfunded. Basically, what the state spent last year is about $143 million statewide in those two programs, and what the state is proposing to spend through the block grant program is about $42 million. So from a county commissioner point of view, that program, if they would take it over, would only be they'd only be receiving about 30 cents on the dollar of what was spent last year, and last year was considered a restricted program.
Okay. What we're going to do is go to another break. Our phone numbers are 774-3691 and 774-3698. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion about Governor Engler's budget cuts and how it's affecting this county and the state. Stay with us.
I'm Tony La Russa, Major League Baseball manager. If you own a pet, you strike a bargain. You get loyalty and trust, a clown when you're sad, and someone to laugh at all your jokes. In return, he needs the basics: food, shelter, love. Love means getting your pets spayed or neutered. Even if we love cats and dogs, there just aren't enough homes for them all. Have your pets spayed or neutered now, because they're counting on us to keep our part of the deal. For more information, contact the Humane Society of the United States, Washington, D.C.
Thousands of forest fires are started by people who never realize what they've done. Some never even set foot in the forest.
Playing basketball is a lot like driving a car. To stay ahead, you have to play it smart on the road. And if there's one thing I've learned from Traverse City to Central Michigan University to the NBA playoffs is you need a strong defense to stay in the game. Here's one defensive move that can make a big difference next time you hit the road. Use your best defense. Safety belts.
Tonight, Dolores had a few drinks, did some crack, and ended up another tragic story. Only she doesn't know it yet. Drugs make you forget. And if you forget how risky sex can be, you could catch the AIDS virus and not know it for months, even years. AIDS, another way drugs can kill.
You call the Boys Town National Hotline at 1-800-448-3000 anytime, day or night. You'll talk to someone who understands and can really help. That's the Boys Town National Hotline at 1-800-448-3000. That's 1-800-448-3000.
Welcome back to Crosstalk on 91 Rock FM and MHTV. The phone lines are open for your comment or question. Call 774-3691 or 774-3698. If the lines are busy, keep trying. Crosstalk on MHTV and 91 Rock FM.
It wasn't too long I couldn't do this. So. Welcome back to Crosstalk. We are talking with John Riley, the director of the Isabella County Department of Social Services, about Governor Engler's budget, and our number is 774-3691, or if the line is busy, call 774-3698. Before the break, we were talking a bit about the interrelationship between the county and there's possible supplementing of your programs. Now, let's talk a little bit about the relationship between the state's role in these programs and the federal role. Has there been a significant decrease in federal assistance as well?
Oh, yes. The federal government has participated to a much greater extent in the past in several programs, most notably the energy program, than they currently are. And therefore, the state has been forced to lower its energy caps. The cap is the annual amount of money that someone on public assistance would receive for energy in a given year. So the caps are significantly lower, although they may have increased in one particular program. Michigan, who's totally dependent on energy in the winter to a much greater extent than, let's say, a state in the West or in the South. Michigan has been really hurt by the federal cuts.
What about the aid to dependent or families with dependent children?
Well, as you know, aid to dependent children was ratably reduced shortly after the governor took office to help balance the budget. Those clients, although they've got part of that ratable reduction back, they're still not at the level they were, let's say, January 1 or December 31, 1990. they've also experienced some loss in benefits to the Medicaid program. Something that was covered as a service last year might not be covered this year. So it's much more difficult for them to use their Medicaid card than it was a year ago.
All right. We do have another call. It's from Gary, a Battle Creek senior. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I have just a short question for you. You've been talking about how the federal cuts and the state cuts have all been so damaging. I was wondering what you see coming up in the future and what effect that's going to have. Is it going to get worse or is it going to get better, in your opinion?
Well, my opinion is that it will continue to get a little worse. As you know, Congress recently attempted to extend the unemployment benefits. They were vetoed by President Bush, and at latest report that I have, President Bush has enough votes to sustain his veto. So obviously people who are drawing unemployment are much less likely to be receiving public assistance. So although we were optimistic when the Congress passed the extension of the unemployment benefits, it doesn't appear, at least to us at this time, that we'll see any increase in the available period of time that people will continue to receive, let's say, extended unemployment benefits.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Mr. Riley, Governor Engler is trying what is considered to be a very, or I should say, an approach that a few states try in balancing the budget, and that is to say he's trying to balance the budget without raising taxes.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, everything that we've talked about up to now indicates to me, and I think to the people that have been calling, that the cuts are doing a lot of harm and not as much good as it could be. Do you think that raising taxes may be something that he needs to consider doing?
Politically, I think he's not in a position at this time to consider raising taxes. The sentiment of the general population today in November is such that it'd be political suicide for him to consider raising taxes.
Now you're referring to such things as recall efforts and perhaps some frustrations people are having with other programs that have been cut?
People are looking for property tax relief.
Mm-hmm.
The recent millage elections by local school districts were by and large unsuccessful, not because there wasn't a need, it's just that people want public education, at least at the K-12 level, in my opinion, funded by some means other than property tax. They want property tax relief. They want less government. I'm not sure they wanted the form of less government they're currently receiving.
This brings up an interesting point, because obviously the people that own the homes are generally the people that are employed and people that have some sort of income so that they could pay taxes, obviously. Which brings me to my next question. That is, there have been allegations that the people who have the most to lose from Engler's budget are not the same people who elected him.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, that is pretty interesting. How would you respond to that issue?
Well, if you don't vote, I mean, you lose your opportunity to tell an elected official in a very important way that they're there to represent you. They're there to represent your county. And people on public assistance, by and large, and of course there are exceptions to it, are not registered to vote. And if they're registered to vote, they don't normally vote in elections. Today, if you're a resident of the city of Mount Pleasant, you have the opportunity to elect 3 city commissioners. I'm willing to bet that of the people who are receiving public assistance and living in the city of Mount Pleasant, very few of them voted in today's election.
Why do you think that is?
Their level of self-esteem and I think their attitude that my vote makes a difference, it just isn't there.
So there may be a sentiment that they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. It doesn't matter who gets elected.
Yeah, it just doesn't.
Things will stay the same.
It just will stay the same. They really feel disenfranchised.
Well, obviously, this is not a new issue. Every November, the same thing. We hear the same thing. People aren't voting. People aren't voting. Something is being perpetuated. Some sort of these feelings that your clients and a lot of the people that don't vote. And that certainly isn't limited to people on welfare.
No. I don't want to.
Students are another issue. Some of that type of thing. But what is there something causing this, or is it just something that they've grown used to?
Well, they've never participated in the political process, so they really don't feel a part of it. Certainly there are exceptions, but as a general rule, people on public assistance have not participated in either a local or state political process, and therefore they don't feel a part of it. It's really unfortunate that if people on public assistance were politically active and convinced their friends and neighbors, I think elected officials would take a much greater interest in making sure that there were greater job training opportunities for people on public assistance, that there'd be more literacy programs, there'd be more high school dropout prevention programs.
So then perhaps public officials are also frustrated in saying that what maybe the sentiment is, what's the point of helping these people? They're not going to vote, and perhaps they're wasting. The public official may feel that he or she is wasting some time, some valuable time that's needed to cultivate other constituencies that do vote.
I think our local public officials care, and they have compassion. They're just frustrated because they have new responsibilities, and yet the revenue picture remains the same. If you look at county government, 5 years ago, county government wasn't responsible for recycling. They weren't responsible for paying the 911 system. They certainly didn't have the landfill costs expenses to work into their budget. You add several new departments to your budget, and you don't significantly increase your revenue, and you have major budget problems. So the county has experienced new programs, but not matching new revenue to offset it.
Okay. Now, have you been involved in any meetings or brainstorming sessions with legislators, either on a statewide, countywide, or even within certain cities, to figure out maybe some alternatives of what can be done about this problem, at least on a local level?
We've met both with the county elected officials and our state elected officials to express our concern in the severity and the magnitude of the cuts, and to make sure that they fully understood that when you eliminated general assistance employables, you not only eliminated it for the 18 to 25-year-olds, you eliminated it for the 18 to 65-year-olds. And realistically, in a depressed economy, a limited number of people in their 50s and 60s are competitive in the job market. And if you have limited resources, you probably ought to target them toward the 20 and 30-year-olds rather than the 50 and 60-year-olds. That's unfortunate, but when you have limited resources, you really need to target it toward the group that's probably going to have the greatest return on your investment. And I guess that's a form of age discrimination. But when you have extremely limited resources, you have an obligation to maximize them.
Okay. On that note, we will go to break. Our number is 774-3691 or 774-3698. We'll be right back with Crosstalk and Engler's budget cuts. Thank you for tuning in.
And now a few words about raising children.
Run, jump, climb, walk, laugh and cry. Throw, fetch, play catch, slip and slide. Listen, swim, eat, grin, cook and cheer. Giggle, wait, talk straight, woo, be there.
Love isn't just something you say, it's something you do. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
From Belleau Wood to Verdun, Okinawa to Iwo Jima, Incheon to Chosin, Kantien to Kaisan, Basra to Kuwait. They've been on the job for 75 years for their country and their corps. Happy 75th birthday to the United States Marine Corps Reserve. Semper Fidelis.
Get your drinking water. Take one.
Is your water safe to drink? From the faucet to the sink. Is it good for moms and babies? We want to know and don't be made. GEM. G-E-M. GEM. G-E-M. If your water comes from the ground, can you protect what's going down? Keep that water clean and pure. Get some S so you can be sure. GEM can help you understand. GEM can help you make a plan. GEM can help you share the facts. GEM can get you in the act.
What's GEM?
G stands for groundwater. E stands for education. M, well, that's Michigan. Groundwater education in Michigan.
GEM has something for everyone. Call 517-353-3742 and get involved.
That's a wrap.
800-448-3000.
Welcome back to Crosstalk on 91 Rock FM and MHTV. The phone lines are open for your comment or question. Call 774-3691 or 774-3698. If the lines are busy, keep trying. Crosstalk on MHTV and 91 Rock FM.
Welcome back to Crosstalk. We're talking about Governor Engler's budget and his attempts to balance it. We have John Riley, the director of Isabella County Department of Social Services tonight. And for those of you who just joined us, once again, the number is 774-3691 or 774-3698. Before the break, we were talking about the different age groups that were getting cut off and maybe some specific issues regarding each one of those. Now, let's talk about the cuts to the programs that benefit the elderly for a moment here.
Unfortunately, the cuts to the elderly are also been severe. We've had a great deal of success with adult home help keeping the elderly in their own home.
This is volunteer?
Well, no. Let's say you were an elderly person and you needed assistance with daily living. Let's say you needed someone to clean your house, someone to remove the snow, some personal chore services. Some of the cuts in those areas will make it much more difficult for some of our elderly in the community to remain in their own homes this winter. Therefore, we'll probably try to place them with relatives, which in some cases will work. Some cases it won't. We may have to look at some adult foster care placements.
It's a pretty tough situation. Yeah. And I imagine then all of these problems are really causing quite a bit of tumult in your office, trying to place people.
Considerable.
How are you? How is your staff coping with this in terms of? Are they looking at new options? Are they exhausted in their resources?
Well, At least for the first 30 days, with other agencies having a limited amount of funding, we were fairly successful. What those agencies are now telling us, though, is that they spent 3 months' worth of funding in 1 month, and that although they were available to us in October, they're not going to be available to us in November. So we're anticipating that November for us will be much more difficult than the month of October, which we just finished.
All right. Do you have any long-term goals for remedying the situation? That's
funny.
a loaded question.
It's funny you should ask that. I spent the day in Lansing where one of the topics of conversation was the 92-93 budget, which, as you know, Governor Engler will present to the legislature in February. But departments have a responsibility to get their recommendations to the Department of Management and Budget this month. And as severe as the cuts are currently, most state departments are being asked to submit a 95% budget for 92-93.
Another reduction.
Another reduction.
Okay.
And if one department or one program within a department is held harmless, then the 5% has to be spread disproportionately among other programs. So
now they're already discussing the next budget, but what's going to happen to the people that were cut off in the meantime? Some of these people may not even be alive because of with the winter and well, obviously there's a lot of concern there to see that budget, what little of it there is.
Yeah, there are some cases pending in the courts against the Michigan Department of Social Services right now. If the department should lose those cases, where is the money going to come from to restore those benefits? The General Assistance Coalition of Human Service Agencies that are currently suing the department over the elimination of the General Assistance Employable Program, if they should win in court and the legislature hasn't appropriated any money, I mean,
this is going to cause a very major shift. But then perhaps Governor Engler will start looking at other options for where to cut in some of the programs that are, I should say, the people that put him in office. A lot of business people, homeowners. These people are soon going to be affected to a greater degree if that should happen. And is that fair to say?
Well, certainly the public assistance cuts, the money that we've taken out of the local economy is going to hurt the local business people. People on public assistance, when they get their check, they cash it that day, and they spend their money in the local community. You don't find any public assistance people taking their public assistance check and investing it on the New York Stock Exchange.
Right.
The grant levels were so small that, that money was in the local economy and turned over probably several times.
Okay, now moving back toward the issue of the local business. Before, as you recall, we were discussing the problem that exists with an abundance of Central Michigan University students looking for, and in many cases, receiving jobs part-time or otherwise, and they're obviously competing with general assistance clients for the same jobs. You said before that Central students have certain things going for them as far as advantages, perhaps our educational level, their level of articulation. What can the university, what can Central do on a local level to be part of the solution to these problems?
That's a real good question. I'm sure if a representative of Central was here, they'd also explain to you that they too took a share of budget cuts, and that they're probably looking at downsizing in the coming year, which will make the employment problem in the community all that much worse. It would be nice if Central was expanding, but that's not realistic. just the opposite is true. We're all aware of the recent articles that have appeared in the paper that Central is downsizing and has to make up several shortages in their budget. So we see them as adding to the problem, at least in the short term. They're probably not going to be of much help to people on public assistance.
Okay. Now, obviously, in a sort of to take a collaborative approach to solving this problem, obviously, Central, everyone's hurting financially. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's out. There's not much Central can do to be of help financially. They've got, as you said, a number of problems in that regard anyway. However, to try and brainstorm some creative solutions, bearing in mind that Central has 17,000 students all studying various areas, sometimes, in some cases, community recreation, for instance, through the RPA department, sociology, counseling, psychology, and faculty and support staff in those areas. Let's look at some brainstorming options, such as setting up programs. For instance, internships are often done either for free or on a very small stipend, where, say, certain community recreation programs or certain so the education people teaching self-sufficiency issues to clients. Obviously, this is becoming rather nebulous. As I said, we're brainstorming. But have any of these issues been discussed on ways that personnel or student resources could be used? Because obviously that although time is money, it certainly is not as much as some of these other things would cost.
A lot of students and faculty recently participated in a fundraiser for the local soup kitchen. Mm-hmm. And that was highly successful. The Salvation Army in the coming months will have their annual Bell Ringer campaign. And a lot of students in the past have volunteered to stand outside businesses and ring the bell, and that money that's raised, covers a lot of the emergencies, hopefully, that we were able to cover last year that we're not able to cover this year. At the present time, the local United Way is in its annual fundraising activity, and there are numerous organizations on campus that are supporting United Way. I think United Way, as a coalition of human service agencies, realizes that the magnitude and the severity of the local problem is going to be much worse this year than it was last year. So, yeah, students and faculty are doing a lot.
Mm-hmm. The fact remains, though, obviously, that there's people without food on their table, without shelter, without heat, without electricity. And I know we keep asking, well, what are we going to do? And maybe your answer is, I don't know. And a lot of people have the same answer. No one seems to know. But to the people that are without these basic necessities, it's very hard for us to just say, I don't know. Obviously, where can we point the finger for this?
It's difficult to point at any one group. Certainly the legislature, when they passed the budget, I'm not sure they fully understood the magnitude of the problem that they were dumping on local communities. Mm-hmm. They eliminated two major programs, the Emergency Needs Program and the General Assistance Medical Program. I mean, to think that counties would be interested in picking that up with only 30% of the available funding of what was spent last year, to me, just doesn't seem realistic. I mean, if you were an elected county official and I came to you and said, the state has decided that the county should run this program, therefore you can have local control, but oh, by the way, you can only have 30 cents for every dollar that we spent last year, you're not going to be very enthusiastic or excited about it. And certainly our commissioners weren't.
Okay. Well, on that note, we have to cut off. It is the end of the show once again. I'm not sure that we can do anything in the short term about this problem, but I would encourage all of you to get involved, and that includes voting. So I guess it's a little late for today, but anyway, next week we'll be talking about animal rights, and again, this is Crosstalk. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.
This has been Crosstalk on MHTV and 91 Rock FM. Tune in again next Tuesday night at 10 o'clock.